The customer course is one of the new organizational perspective classes that combines aspects of basic marketing. Essentially, the course is split into two halves. The first half is more traditional marketing, thinking about some of the frameworks that are generally used in marketing, the 3 C's, the 4 P's. The second half of the semester is focused a little bit more on the integration of marketing and sort of evaluating business ventures, thinking about customer lifetime value, thinking about competitor strategy, and et cetera.
To think about if you have a customer strategy, you should also be able to work back into the organization and see how the organization should execute against that customer strategy. And so that's the 360-degree view, so to speak, the holistic perspective of not trying to think in terms of silos, in terms of functions, but really thinking about holistically how the organization as a whole can execute against that strategy. And so in the course itself, we would, after we teach the traditional marketing aspects of the course, we go into doing something different from what everybody else does, which is we bring in people from accounting, we bring in people from organizational behavior, etc., to talk about, and finance and operations, etc., to talk about how the rest of the organization needs to align itself with this particular strategy.
There are two main things that I really enjoyed about the TIAA-CREF case, which was the last case of our semester. First, it was an open case, so we weren't assigned any specific questions, and we were at liberty to draw in any of the analytical frameworks that we had learned throughout the quarter and apply them to this particular case. And then a second thing that I really enjoyed about this last case was that 4 people from the marketing team at CREF came to our class and watched our final presentations and asked us questions based on the content of our presentations and also based on the recommendations that our classmates had made a point of bringing up during their presentation. So it really made the case seem much more applicable to the real world, in the fact that what we were studying was something that the marketing team at CREF is struggling with today, and they were very receptive to our feedback and recommendations.
The idea behind this case was when Herb Allison, who was the CEO, took over in 2002, ultimately he had a challenge to sort of build up the brand. They ultimately were losing a lot of business when people got to retirement age. So once they actually were cashing in their retirement savings, they were moving on to companies like Fidelity and Vanguard, and they ultimately were losing a lot of business because they weren't keeping people at that time. So the idea of this case was ultimately, how do we build up the TIAA-CREF brand? How do we reorganize, restructure, and differentiate TIAA-CREF from others? And it was interesting because we got to look at the case from 2 different perspectives. We got to look at it in 2002 when they were making these decisions, and then we got to look at it in 2008 in terms of what they actually did and how they repositioned themselves.
The way it was presented was that the protagonist, the new CEO that was brought in from Wall Street, was faced with a number of organizational challenges and basically had deployed different groups within the firm to look at specific issues. There were 6 issues. And then ultimately the case broke it down into these 6 issues, offering sort of what was the current status quo that was occurring at the company, some proposed strategies, some caveats, and then it was up to us to determine which of the 6 strategies was most appropriate to pursue, which priority to put on each of those strategies, and how to actually possibly execute them.
We teach the students to be more holistic in their perspective, and I think the idea of customer focus and the lack of customer focus in an organization essentially boils down to people thinking either very narrowly or being set in their routines. And I think the fact that we've kind of shaken them out of their normal ways of thinking and kind of getting them to realize the value of multiple perspectives, the value of alternative perspectives in a structured decision-making context, I think is kind of the best legacy we leave for these students as they go out into the world and try to make these kinds of decisions in their own jobs.
Previously in the course we talked about customer segmentation, how to give how your value proposition to different segments of the customer base has to be different. As Sudhir gives an example in class, which is he talks about a lot, is if you have a certain set of customers which likes iced tea and another which likes hot tea, giving tepid tea doesn't serve anyone. I think in that sense, I think we brought those skill sets to class, but also in terms of being a capstone course, analyzing the course towards the end was also in the sense we also had to bring in our learnings from competitor and other courses in. Which I think helped, because if we'd done this earlier on, we wouldn't have brought those perspectives in. So in that sense, I think it plays well to the course, where it's towards the end of the curriculum that you've gotten whatever you've gotten out of the customer course, but also other courses, and you're bringing all of them to the table to analyze the case.
It gives you the basic marketing frameworks, but it also gives you something on top of that to think about things not only as a marketing issue, but as an overall business issue, and taking that customer perspective in thinking about what customers want and how that's either how you position it, how you price it, or how you deliver it to them, but also thinking about how they deliver value and how that competitive set matches with other products in your portfolio, I think really brings it together and makes it a more holistic view of how to bring something to market.